What is up, DTube? What is up, the Steam blockchain? Today I want to talk about payment networks versus store of value. So I saw an amazing video that sort of opened my eyes. It opened my eyes for an interesting way of looking at this. So, okay, we have Bitcoin, right? And then we sort of have cryptos that sort of want to be like payment networks. And you can in many ways also say that Bitcoin is like a payment network. But most people are using Bitcoin sort of as a store of value. Okay. Then you also have some other cryptos, want to be payment networks sort of, okay. So this is something that's very, very interesting because I saw this interesting video that sort of made this argument that it basically said this, that it looks like store of value is going to be worth more than sending value around in, like, let's say a payment network, because the argument was it's not that often we actually have like doing payments back and forth, like the idea of the TPS, transactions per second, that people need like millions of TPS and all this obsession in the crypto industry. The argument was that, well, we don't really pay for that much stuff, or we're not really gonna like send value around even more and more and more, in the way of like, how often do you actually need to pay for something? How often do you pay your friend for something? How often do you pay, like, rent and food? And maybe once in a while you send something to a friend. But the argument is that people actually just want a store of value. That the store of value is worth more. That if you have the perfect store of value, it's worth more. And if it just goes up a little bit every year, there is no incentive to move it around. It's like the argument was that if you make the ideal store of value, then you don't need payment networks as much, in a way. Because it's like, if a person just have, with game theory, if they have some value that they just store and it just goes up over time, then let's say everyone has the value and it slowly goes up, and it's like the best store of value with the most innovative things that people want. Then if everyone then has value, where would the incentive be for the payment network? So for example, you can look at these things like PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard. They are around 770 billion, something like that, from this stats that I saw. And gold, which is just store of value, it's 10x more in value, and gold is just sitting there. So the argument that's really an interesting thing to consider, that maybe you just need the perfect store of value, and then eventually people are going to have value. And yes, sometimes people move around value, but the thing that people are looking for is just safety, security, and like the best store of value. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating if that is true, that people are just looking for a store of value, and if everyone, this is very game theory like, if everyone store their value with the best system, that of course needs to be safe, secure, and stuff like that. But how that would play out, I mean, it is very, very interesting. So with a lot of store of value at the moment, it is not perfectly accessible for everyone, right? It can be quite complex, actually. But with better technology, maybe you can make some amazing store of value that just trumps the idea that payment networks is where the main value is, because you have a lot of there is a lot of discussions about that, well, payment networks are the main value. That the thing that transmits the value, and that the fees that are going to come in from that, and that is the big business. And of course, people have been fed this a lot. And I want to say, I don't really know. Like, I don't know if store of value or the payment networks, what it eventually in the long term are going to win out, or if they're just going to play side by side, or because I mean, in many ways they are very interconnected. A store of value also makes so you can use it in a way as a payment network, but the whole idea is that, you know, that mainly you use store of value for store of value. You mainly have value set. And I mean, if we look at people, what they're doing on a daily basis, most people are looking into a screen. Maybe they're doing some form of activity, but in many ways you can argue that the AI is going to do so much stuff that the human are mainly just going to do what they enjoy, right? Which means eventually that like the incentives for people eventually would be to have their value in the place that is proven to be the most secure and safe, and that has the best track record and has the best form of backing. And I don't know exactly how you would measure all of this, but just because it's a very nuanced topic. But it is quite fascinating to look at it from the perspective of, if you have used a perfect digital store of value, then eventually it seems as one brand is going to win out over all the other brands, and that it's going to be a long journey to see how it plays out, because there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff you need to look at. So, for example, in a way, you can make arguments about the payment network that people are going to have a massive demand for using a payment network and creating massive liquidity, and that people are going to do this manually by looking at something and sending value around and all this. But the other argument is that, well, if the AI can do all of that, why would a human do it? Can't you just have it like electricity or running water, that it just goes so good, so smooth, and it just works so great that why even touch it? Maybe we just need some maintenance here and there. You have the whole arguments about the trustless thing, right? But in many ways, there's always someone that can in many ways tweak something, or maybe the AI quantum computers, it can probably do something. If the power grid goes down, is that a great store of value? I mean, in the long run, everything fails in some ways, right? But humans can sort of work at looking at how can you store stuff. And I mean, in many ways, this is probably an ancient discussion. How do you store value? How do you preserve language? How do you preserve information for a very, very long time? Yeah. So it's quite a deep discussion in many ways. But it's quite interesting to look at, because I think that most people, or many people, consider, the payment network in terms of, let's say, if you just look at the crypto, it hasn't really worked out so well. And we don't know if it ever will work out. And we don't know exactly what's going to work, what's going to fail. But what we can do, we can look at the industry from a day-to-day basis. And you can sort of see general trends. We can see what kind of stuff do people invest time, energy, and resource into. And this gives people sort of indicators for what something potentially can be worth. And it's very interesting, the concept of worth. So we know that we can create value from nothing, but how you retain value gets very interesting in an AI age. And what is a virtual digital dollar, like what kind of goods and services can you get in the physical world with this, and is a virtual digital dollar the same as a real sort of physical digital dollar? I mean, it's like the whole value chain changes when you sort of, when time and space gets sort of mixed up in terms of, well, now a person can make value from nothing, and they don't have to put in so much physical time and energy maybe into something, and it just works maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating how people retain value in many ways. Is they have to really pay attention, like daily, to see where stuff is heading. Yeah. So it's probably something that's going to be talked about a lot in the future. Payment network compared to store of value. What is going to win out in the long run? Or are you going to have both? It's something that you can speculate in forever. But maybe speculate is not something you should do. Maybe people should just try to, in many ways, what I've tried to do is like, I can mix, especially when you get up to big numbers, it's quite hard to grasp. It's quite hard to grasp mental frameworks for what kind of value something actually represents, because you sort of have to have an industry, and industry needs to get stable before you sort of understand like what is really value. And that's going to take probably decades. People do not want to hear that. And that's also one of the main reasons why people are only looking at everything they're looking at everything in many ways 1 year into the future. There is almost nobody that is considering stuff in 5 years or 10 years, because it's so much beyond their horizon. So all of their data is basically limited. So a lot of stuff that people are doing right now, a lot of stuff people seem to care about right now, they're probably not going to care about in 5 years. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. A really decade-long process to see how it plays out, basically. And it's funny now in sort of like a global world, because one big news story can change a lot of things. One big hack can change a lot of things. So a lot of these systems are sort of being tested now from a day-to-day basis. And humans also being tested in terms of humans sort of realize in many ways that they have to know a lot of stuff. They have to sort of be like a blockchain in many ways. I mean, it's like people try to hack a lot of blockchains, and now also people trying to hack sort of people, because everything is just when everything becomes information technology, it means that people need to completely change their view of intelligence in terms of they sort of need to because they are not at the moment, they're going to have a period where they do not delegate security to someone else, or maybe they do it, but they sort of start to realize the flaws, potential flaws of that, where you can create a lazy system where you just think someone else is going to handle the security and safety of some kind of system, and then you notice that, oh, they're not really doing that good job, and humans then eventually have to sort of look at everything from all kind of sides to sort of be ready for anything. And in the long run, it makes the people sort of become wired for take on more tasks. So for example, and blockchains can work on that as well. So let's say a blockchain is getting attacked a lot, but it still hangs on. It learns, people develop better code for it and stuff like that, then it can find a way to be alive, even though it's running on life support. But if something has been through a lot, it can come out extremely strong in the long run. And that is also, I mean, the same thing happens with humans, and that is something that's going to be fascinating with software, to see how software can, in some ways you can say, learn, but this actually is because humans are making codes, and eventually computers are going to write code, and the better these systems get, the more they learn, the more resilient they can become, and the more they may hang around. So are humans really gonna do that many transactions in the future when they can, like, let's say they can send a transaction by having a thought, right? And it just happens. Isn't it then going to create this situation where it's just going to be store of value? And most all the information technology is basically going to be free, and just because what most of humans look at value right now, it's a lot of information technology, and if all of that is free, then it's just like, okay, we can just create focus on the best security, the best safety, and how to create the best sort of decentralized network and best store of value. And we can sort of learn from looking at past stuff that has happened and sort of try to create something that is so superior. Gonna be interesting to see how this plays out, but it was quite an interesting video to see this, that like this idea that store of value in some ways may be more important than transactions per second. Yeah. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. I'm going to think more about it because it's so fascinating. Because there's been a long time where people, let's say, have been using some payment service, let's say banks, and the whole core idea has been for a very long time that, well, they provide a payment service, this is where all the value is. And that they sort of, in many ways, you can argue that they sort of drifted off, that they should have be focused a lot more on being the best store of value. And I mean, you can make arguments that they still store of value, but I would say it can be very complicated to use it for store of value. In terms of, it can be a lot of gateways you have to jump into. It's a permission system, but yeah, I just wanted to ramble a little bit on that. Payment networks versus store of value. It's going to be a huge topic, I think, in the future, because let's say people realize that, well, I mean, look at it like this: like, if someone earns interest on something, in many ways, and let's say they have $1 billion and they're earning 3% per year, like $3 million, okay? Would they really care about being paid more? I mean, you can make the argument that, yeah, they would like some more payments, but maybe they would look at, wait a sec, we don't have to do the payment network thing. We can just store the value and just focus on that. And all the work, we can say, is kind of free. And we have so many AI robots that can sort of do a lot of work. Have the robots can produce the technology. We have the 3D printer. So nobody really has to send someone something else. Now, we're probably going to do both, right? But in many ways, people have this vision that people are going to do billions of transactions per second, while that actually may not even be needed. It may not even be, because people usually extract from what we currently have, and they sort of look at it, okay, we do a lot of transactions right now, so if we have better technology, we're going to do billions some more. That's in many ways the same thing with how people look at technology, where it's like, People take something we do right now and then just linearly look at it. Okay, so if we do something now, we're just gonna do it more in the future. So for example, maybe people look at it as, okay, we do video right now, so we're gonna do more video right now, in the future, and that's gonna produce more gigabytes. But maybe people are just gonna extract the data so instead of download a whole video, like 5 gigs file or 1 gig file, maybe they're just gonna download 100 or 2 megabytes and consume the same amount of information with less data. And maybe you can have some AI that produce the video, so and it has a lot of pre-configured stuff from the past, so it can create a virtual video on the spot. So then maybe it can create a full video on 10 megabytes. So maybe the data is going to go down, right? And that's the same with store value in many ways, that people are looking at stuff like, okay, but we have zeros, we need more zeros to do something, but maybe in the future, if a robot can do something, maybe it's just going to give you something, and then there's no need for the zeros anymore. Like, so it can play out in many ways. It can really play out in many ways, and it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see how it will play out. Yeah, that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. As I said, I'm probably going to talk more about it in the future, because my views are probably going to change on it. And just because this is a vibrant industry, it changes every day. How people look at, oh, this is great store value today. Oh, this seems useless today. People's opinions change, technology change, culture change, all of this. So yeah, have an awesome day, DTube and the Steam blockchain. Bye bye.